Welcome, friends, to the Visionary Show. This is a live stream show for those of you who are new here, where we talk to founders of venture-backed companies who are doing cool stuff and building the future. I'm Jaron Lukasiewicz, for those of you who are new here, and with me today is a founder I am fascinated by because he is working on something that I really experienced when I was running my first venture-backed company called Coinsetter. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Yoshi Yokokawa. Yoshi, how's it going, man?
Good. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So for those of you at home, first off, you're going to notice that I have a little bit of an upgrade in my studio. That's going to keep happening, and we're going to make this keep looking as cool as possible. And in the future, we might actually live stream who I'm talking to in the background. We'll see. We're going to play around with a bunch of stuff. But getting on to business, Yoshi, you are, what year did you found Alpaca?
So we originally started Alpaca in 2015, and we did a little bit different business as what we are doing right now. And we pivoted into what Alpaca is in 2017.
Yeah, tell me about that pivot. Actually, that's always a good story.
Yeah, so we started initially building a deep learning AI prediction model to sell that models to financial institutions like banks, dealer desks, trading firms, and hedge. Where the difficulty of the scaling the business, selling alpha generation prediction models to the financial institutions. So that was the really main reason why we sold to someone else. And also we always had the vision of providing the product as many people as possible in the world. And doing this API first broker dealer, we felt we had the best chance achieving the vision.
Yeah, and I think where you guys went with your product is definitely the right place at the right time. And so for those of you who don't know, one of my first companies was one of the first blockchain companies in the US. And basically I had to go build a whole bank from the ground up. And that's really, really tough, both from a technology perspective and from a regulatory standpoint. And so I think more and more companies, like if you're a FinTech founder out there who is trying to go start, figure out this whole space, let me tell you, one, it's complicated, and you definitely need infrastructure like what Alpaca is setting up. And one of the ways you can get involved with them is actually by, real quick, hello out there to Santiago. Thank you for your comment, and let us know if you have any questions. So, I think one of the really interesting things that you guys are doing from a growth perspective, Yoshi, is you guys have started a developer community that is one of your greatest lead gen sources right now. Tell the viewers a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So we are building API infrastructure product, even though this is a very much FinTech financial services, but how we see our product as a really developer tool. And if you think about developer tool, we really have to be immersive into the developer community. They talk about the products they use, they share about ideas, and they commit stuff source repo. So our focus has been really to make sure that we are doing the right thing and to really hype up the developer excitement and making sure that there are a bunch of the tools and codes out there that we are contributing so that developers feel that they're welcomed. And right now we have a lot of activity and user communication going on our Slack community channel, forums, and Medium publications where users are contributing content and the sharing ideas, educating. Great. And those developers happen to be working at some big companies. They are starting startups. Those our community members are the ones who give us a lot of the business opportunities, and it's working. So
Yeah, well, it reminds me of the strategy that Stripe used, which is really more targeted towards the developers. And I think on a product like yours, those really are the key decision makers. Speaking as a moderately tech savvy CEO, I know that whatever my CTO tells me to do, I'm just gonna do it unless it's like I think there's maybe if it's gonna cost 10K a month is where I start asking questions. Um, one mistake that I felt really bad about during CoinSetter, and I let it go anyway, was that we didn't use AWS. We used Rackspace, which was so fucking expensive. It was like $20,000 a month for no reason. So yeah, it's like you always got to go with your gut. That's what I learned on that one. We could have saved like 100K right there.
Yeah,
But
yeah, definitely. Yeah. We just need to, trust what the developers say. Bases are developers, so they're talking about.
have you been going to any of the venture capital and like kind of fintech events in New York? Well, you're in SF, so yeah, I guess in SF, I'm less familiar with that scene. What's happening there in terms of fintech and just like social life?
Yeah, I think like, when we talk about fintech, I see like, especially like, I feel like last 3 6 months, I see more that's happening. Analogy is this fintech 1.0, 2.0, and then fintech 3.0. This fintech 3.0, as people calling it, as embedded fintech. So embedded fintech, as fintech services are now, Robinhood, the Wealthfront, and SoFi, they all went super vertical, full-on experience inside. And now there's a bunch of the players like ourselves being an infrastructure to empower other services to become a fintech companies. So I think that's how we are seeing like what's happening in the fintech scene in the in San Francisco. And because of that process of embeddedness comes from like API. So it's really a great mix of the finance-minded people as well as the very pure developer API related people are commingling in one place. And so I feel like it's really exciting time how in the SF.
Yeah, you can see that that's actually very different from I'd say like the scene in New York City. And frankly, it's a little more prone towards innovation from what it sounds like. In New York, it's very much like the CEOs get together with the venture capital firms. And that's great if you're raising or like trying to connect and meet people. But I think when the developers aren't playing such a firm role in it, you're really missing out on the most important part, which is like, how do you create a magnitude difference in fintech?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I think like for us, that's an interesting part. We rarely, I rarely go out with the I guess investors for dinner. Maybe I should more. Maybe I should learn that when I was in New York next time.
I mean, it's kind of to each their own. I actually do think that you should always go to dinners with investors for sure. I can connect you with some too if you're interested. But
Great.
I think there's also something to be said about staying heads down. Like I definitely see a lot of entrepreneurs who are just too focused in maybe the social aspect of starting a company, and those tend to be founders who fail. So it sounds like you're doing the right thing. And the reason why we know that actually is something that is one of the most impressive stats I've heard in fintech before, which you launched last November, just over a year ago. And in your first 12 months, you did over $1 billion in transactions. That's incredible. Tell me about that. How did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a lot of factors in it, but I think like, one thing is really focus. And we did focus on one thing. One thing is that, in that broker dealer or trading space, we are building the best API product. API product comes from not only the interface of the API, but also a lot of the codes, open source, and the community support. So I think all those things, got in together to, made the awareness for the people who have been waiting for the product like this. And we were looking for product like this when we did not have Alpaca, who are the financial industry player who understands about the API, who understands about the developers and how the API should work. So I think those things really nail down the needs of the users out there. And I think that was really let us achieve pretty good traction from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's incredible. How much would you say the community you created played into that?
It's actually a lot. Even what kind of features, including trading features, or what kind of language of the SDKs that we community members. Like we did a lot of user interview. We continue to do that both on Slack, both on the phone interview. So it really, I would say, it's all come from the users, like 95%.
Real quick, what's for anyone who's watching and interested in getting involved in your community, and I'll let you clarify more, but this is really a community of FinTech developers, people who are either creating companies or apps that need any sort of they're in the financial services space. Go check them out. Tell the viewers a little bit about how they can find it and get involved.
Sure. So our company's URL is alpaca.markets. But you can always write, search Google with Alpaca trading, and we should come up the very top. If you put the API, definitely we should come up the top.
Perfect. Yeah. So those of you at home, definitely get involved in a community like this. And I want to get back to the community again in just a sec, because I think this is such an important part of the future of marketing. But first, I would like to thank Santiago for sending us 9 Mexican pesos. We are raking in the money today. Thank you, Santiago. So, by the way, Yoshi, this is kind of one of the my favorite parts of the app I was telling you about, Mixer. For those of you who don't know, I've been testing out live streaming on Twitch and Mixer this week. Twitch has more users, but Mixer's far better. And so it's pretty much the most interactive social media app that's ever been created. And one of the parts of it is just there are these channels, Yoshi, where people, they're just spending an hour getting people to send money to them, and it works because they're doing it, and it's just hilarious to watch. So anyway, wow. Yeah, that might be your next crowd. But I'm wondering, getting back to maybe a little bit more serious note here, I'm wondering if you have any tips on community building for people out there who are thinking about building a company that way.
Yeah, I think what's important to the community is definitely one, who are that targeted user base, I feel like. And for our case, it's a purely developers and the developer who are interested in some kind of financial market. Community for, that's definitely the first step. And the second step is after knowing that, providing the contents, sources, those community would love to read, love to be engaged. There's a lot of people and the people who wants to also contribute in that kind of thing as a bigger vision. So that's probably how we've been doing so far, and it's working. So I would firstly recommend to understand and really focus on who you're trying to speak to.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point. And it actually is the first chapter in the ebook I wrote on growth hacking. So that book is called Growing with Market Science. I don't think you've read it yet. I'll shoot you a copy. And it kind of goes step by step on what I've learned over the last 10 years that are kind of the key steps to take in developing marketing strategies. And you're really hitting the head on one. It's know who your customer is. And people say this all the time, but I don't think people really appreciate the extent to which they should take this to heart. And so there's one analysis that I talk about in the book called an ICP, which is an ideal customer profile. And an ICP is it's actually one of the simple exercises in the book, and it's just like writing down like who are the people who are like you're truly serving, and becoming more specific about that. Because what I find in my experience is that a lot of entrepreneurs want to kind of cast as wide a net as possible in order not to limit themselves. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing with a lot of founders that you've met over the years. And if those are generally the startups that fail. And so it's all about just kind of figuring out like a specific customer you want to target for now, and then growing with that, and then really creating a message that appeals to them. And then as far as market science concerned, bringing a lot of math into it.
Agree.
Cool. So you are licensed as a broker dealer, which I think is extremely,
Yes.
I mean, that's an extreme undertaking dealing with the regulation. I was telling Yoshi before, I was actually in the process of forming a broker dealer last year, and
Right.
the regulation, the time it takes, and just, I mean, you need a really good compliance person involved in that.
Yeah.
What are, I'm curious, like maybe advice you would have for the fintech entrepreneur who's never started a regulated company before, to kind of know before jumping into that?
Well, I think the first step is that before hiring compliance person, you need to have the basic understanding to be your own compliance person. So if it's, as you know, understanding those protocols, reading books about it, gives a basic understanding how complex and so much stuff that we would have to do it. And I think if it was banking, understanding the similar stuff, AML, KYC, what would be needed to actually start a bank. So those are the understanding the complexity, how hard it is probably the very first step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's good advice. Like really being your own compliance person. And that's maybe the most boring thing we'll say on this show, but it's so true, because the thing is that if you don't take it seriously, then you get slapped with a lot of fines, and you don't want that as a startup.
Yeah. And it's also fines as well. But like also the scars on your career or related person's careers that you are going to hire as well. So understanding that as a CEO, it is, I think, a very important piece of running how much of the risk you're taking, not taking.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I actually want to get into your capital raising process. But first, and I think that's going to be of interest to almost anyone who listens to this who wants to go raise $8 million, which is not a small amount of money. But first, I'm interested to know that you practice yoga. When did you start that?
I started it in 2013 when I was in the midst of day trading full-time myself.
Wow. So was that a bit of a stress release then? Is that kind of like the core of why you started?
Yeah, definitely. I was doing a lot of more of the extreme stuff, like, marathon, triathlon, but it really didn't feel, satisfied I guess, mental part, or like more the spiritual part of necessity that I had. And I realized that yoga, which was, introduced from my, that time girlfriend, like now my wife, that it actually, satisfies all the, verticals, right? It's not only the mental stuff, because the asana, the physical part, is extremely overwhelming. At the same time, pranayama, the breathing technique, and the actual meditation portion is something that I've never really experienced. So it was really great experience that I got to know, and since then I was try to keep up with it.
Yeah, I've been doing Yin Yoga for almost a year now. I think it'll be a year
Wow.
in January, which is a lot more chill than the kinds of yogas you've been doing.
Yeah, but like yoga itself is just so deep, and like as more, there's more that you need to understand and like try to do. So it's like kind of learning about who you are internally. Like a lot of people think about external stuff, including like going into the space and everything, and it's really great, like adventurous stuff. But like going inner of who we are is also this black hole you will never get to the end. And I think like both of the directions of understanding what it is out there is very fascinating to me as a just concept.
Yeah, I'm so there with you. One of the reasons why I've been so kind of gravitating towards yin yoga in particular is because of my meditation practice, which it just ties into very well. For anyone out there who hasn't done yoga before or doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about, yin yoga is kind of like long holds. You're just like, you're not really doing like any of the fast stuff. It's just like you're sitting in you might have your arms on the floor and your head in like a certain position, and you're going to hold there for 3 to 7 minutes. And at the longer you go, the more important that the meditative part of what you're doing is, because if you are you get bored, for instance. Well, if you get bored at 4 minutes, you still got 3 to go. So it's all about that practice of just like coming back to centeredness, happiness, and that's something that I mean, my meditation practice has expanded pretty far. And what I mean by that is, I really started with, like you were mentioning, the pranayama, like the breathing stuff, and that changed my life. But it was really when I started doing transcendental meditation that my meditation practice went up a magnitude. So I always tell people I'm so impressed with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, because not only because he introduced the Beatles and just like did a bunch of cool stuff with meditation, but he went up to the mountains for 2 years, learned that kind of yogi meditation that is like literally you have to go up to the mountains for like 4 years to learn, and then he turned it into a replicable model where now people can learn that same technique in 5 days in like an hour each day. So that's been a big game changer for me, though, just because into my daily life now I can really I think, getting to what you were saying, I'm focused on not just reducing my thoughts, but also like within that space of not having thoughts, being happy. And I think as an entrepreneur, a lot of us, I speak for myself here. I don't know if you relate to this, but I always have a tendency for things not to be good enough. And to always, it's like your company, you're always working on it. There's always something to do. So instead of, and what I've found is that is actually linked to survival mode. So the secret to really crushing it is to get yourself out of survival mode, especially when everyone else would say you should be in it, and then just be happy. And that's really my most recent practice, which is I think that TM,
that's deep, and thank you for sharing that with me. Like it's really deep, it's really big. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Yoshi. Well, I'm happy to. I mean, I can't legally teach you TM, but I'm happy to teach you a very close alternative anytime.
Nice. Wow.
Cool. Well, that's interesting. I love that you're into that stuff too. So let's get back to a topic that I think can really help some of the viewers watching this, which is capital raising. Tell me a little bit about
Yeah.
your most recent capital raising round, what the
Mm-hmm.
market was like, and tips that you
Mm.
would have for people going out right now.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, the capital raising for the latest round, which we did, we raised $6 million in August, I think, was to me not an easy process at all, honestly. And the only thing that I remember is basically the rejections and why people don't understand, or like why we don't get accepted, or those kind of things, why we get rejected. That is really the only thing that I most things that I remember, because but because most of the times we get rejected. But like during the course of the process, I think I really learned. I think it's connected to Jaron, you just talked about those meditation, like being happy stuff, but like accepting and embracing the fact, or embracing where we are as a company and where I am as a CEO, is, I think, was a very key component that I was able to move away from this, being desperate. And I think being desperate is the worst situation that you can be in when you're capital raising, because nobody wants to fund the person who's
Yeah,
desperate.
that's really interesting, because that's really getting into the survival mode, right? So how did you get yourself
right.
past that?
So I think one is definitely, it's like radical acceptance, right? Like nobody wants to accept that you suck, or nobody wants to accept that what you've been putting your so much resource into is not good enough as you thought it was. And firstly, accepting that, and really think from yourself, instead of how the people want to hear what you would say, was very game changer for me. And kind of releasing the stress, basically moving away from the survival mode, but to be basically happy that we are doing this, and what we are doing should work and is working, because our logic works, instead of that getting really impacted by what the investors are telling you at that meeting or at that moment.
Yeah, that really is key, right? And I think one of the hardest parts that you came over, that I find people have a really challenging time with, is the rejection part. And that's a whole long story. I will say, I look at that, like my tips or hacks on that are, one, if you're afraid of rejection in a cold email, use software like Lemlist. That's what I'm using right now for all my outbound campaigns. And it's then you can just write the general email. You can maybe, if you want to, you can edit it for any individual people personally, but mostly it's the worst thing, the most unnecessary thing is fearing rejection from people you don't even know. And when you're emailing a bunch of, I imagine you guys emailed investors to start, or how did you guys kind of bring new investors on board?
Yes, right. So at that sense, we were pretty fortunate, because we were this Y-Combinator program, and we got a pretty good introduction to a lot of great investors. And what sucked, or what was really really difficult to deal with, was that because we get to the first meeting, or we get to pretty far in the meetings, but you get rejections, right? So you kind of, at that point, you feel you're getting understood, or you feel you're getting having some relationships, then you get rejected. And that really made me feel okay, there's something wrong with not really the company, but about me as a CEO leading this thing. So that was really the difficult part that I had to move on, to understand that really don't take it personal, or just it can be that way, but it's okay. and just embracing that fact is fine too. So that was the process that I felt, during this capital raising journey.
You know what's something else that you said that really I found to be really interesting is this concept of accepting where you're at. And I mean, I'm just like, there are a lot of people who have told me that throughout my life, but first of all, you and I both come from a FinTech background, and we know, and before that, finance. And I don't know if you agree with me, but I believe that finance is an industry where it's impossible to be happy with what you have. It kind of breeds this mindset of, think about, I went into investment banking right after school, and when I did that, it's like, if I made I think 150K out of college, but that wasn't a lot of money because someone above me made 1.5 million. And so, but from their standpoint, someone made 10 million, and beyond that, someone made 100 million. So it's an industry where people are working for others who are always making 10 times more than them, which breeds unhappiness. And it's not to say that you can't become happy in finance. I'm sure there are a few people who have done TM who are.
Like Ray Dalio.
I was just gonna say that mostly Ray Dalio, who's on the top. So I mean, there's that playing in there too. But there's a really cool video of him from a week ago where he is P. Diddy's mentor.
Oh, wow.
So he and P. Diddy get into a mentor meeting where Ray Dalio is P. Diddy's mentor, and I thought that was really cool. I personally think Ray Dalio is pretty boring, but I respect him, and I think that he is very knowledgeable.
He's a really interesting. But I think about this finance, I completely agree, because I felt this inflation of demand and this desire to get more and more, and I felt no goal. And that's what I see when I was dealing with the subprime mortgages and securitization at Lehman Brothers. People get more, you want to get more. At the end of the day, it always pops out somewhere. And I think that's the cause of the bubble, wanting more without really knowing and understanding, accepting what it is or who you are, or and so I think I really agree, and I'm on the same page with you working in the really finance industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you get to that point, and I don't know if you struggle with this at all too, but what I find is that balance, figuring out where that balance is for you between it's not I want to go live in the mountains and give up all my worldly possessions, but at the same time, I also don't care at all about being a billionaire. I did back when I was maybe 22, but now life is much more about the experience that I'm seeing through my eyes. And what does that journey look like? And so, but that balance, we're here working instead of being doing something that's just completely for fun. And so looking at that time that you're going to spend, how much you're going to, how high you want to set your goals. I think that's really what it comes down to. You stop comparing yourself to others, but you more to yourself and trying to set goals that are still going to make you happy.
And I think it's a really important point also in the capital raising process as well, is that what is that you are trying to achieve, even though it's really, really far away. But I think I think it comes down to setting the vision and setting the culture around it too. But once it's set, you're kind of invincible, because you're not compared to anyone, because that's your original vision where you think that it should be done and it should be achieved, and you start thinking yourself how you get there. And capital raising becomes one of that. And if that investors don't agree with your view or don't understand your view, you don't feel very much disappointed at that point, because you believe in it. You believe in the be. And I feel like to me that's been the balance. This is not a game of okay, how much the company should be valued. As a CEO, of course, we have to think about it as a fiduciary duty, but to run this and to wake up every day and do this thing is how can we get to this vision. For us is to unlock investment and asset management, everyone on the earth. And for us, in order for us to do that, we want to be an infrastructure and empower and enable every single developers who want to do that kind of services in different cultures, different countries, different jurisdictions. And we want to be the first player to empower that as seamless as possible. And we believe that with that vision, we can really unlock any investing into the US stocks or different type of the financial products access to every single person on the earth.
Wow.
And I think it will be done, and it should be done. And I know that because I'm from Japan, not from here, and I see that different countries, it's not like this in the US where people can access to Robinhood right away.
Wow. Yeah.
It doesn't happen in the rest
That's
of the world.
so true. A big part of what you guys are doing is taking over that complexity of the international differences in banking systems, payment systems, regulations. That's honestly a lot. And that's such huge value though, because once you solve that problem, you're going to be able to help so many companies, just like you already are doing $1 billion of transactions in your first year. Well, Yoshi, I think that's a pretty good note to wrap up on. But before we go, what is your top piece of advice for our entrepreneurs who are listening out there?
I think in order to be a good entrepreneur, believing something where the world is going, and I think also respect your own value from your own personal experience is, I think, the key. To me, not being from the US has a part of the story of what we are doing right now. Going through the Lehman shock, building securitized products subprime was a part of story that what we are doing right now as well. So I think each of the person should have his or her own story to be a part of the things that the entrepreneurs can build on. And it's all unique, and the uniqueness, I think, is the key. And I think respecting that difference and uniqueness, and seeing that and understanding what it is, I think is the first step to kind of build something that can be really valued.
Well said.
Financially as well.
Well said. Believe in your vision and believe in yourself. Well, Yoshi, thank you so much for joining. For those of you at home who are viewing in live, thank you. That is awesome. There are going to be more of you watching this after the live stream. Start coming on the live streams, because you can talk to me in the live chat and I will reply to you on air. Also, thank you to Santiago for sending me my 9 Mexican pesos. I appreciate that. And until next time, subscribe, like, do all that stuff. And until next time, stay visionary.